welcome to this daily meditations interview. My name is Mark Longhurst. I am the publications manager at the CAC, and every several months we take a moment and sit down and speak with someone whose work has inspired Richard Rohr's daily meditations. And I'm thrilled to be speaking today with the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss. He is the senior pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago. And he's also the author of Dancing in the Darkness, Spiritual Lessons for Turbulent Times. So thank you so much, Reverend Moss, for taking the time to speak with us today.
Mark, it's my pleasure. I'm delighted to connect with you and the audience of the center.
One thing you talk about in your book is, well, I should say this. You share lessons from really that you've learned from the heart of Black spirituality.
Yes.
That can support us in times of injustice and oppression. You talk about the witness of Dr. King, of Howard Thurman. Why is it so important to link love with justice?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. Love without justice is simple sentimentality. Justice without love becomes legalism or brutality, as my father says. But when you marry, when love and justice are married, they walk down the aisle and they make a commitment with each other, and they end up producing children. One child named liberation, the other child named transformation. And America is not comfortable with love linked to justice. We want retribution, not distributive justice. We want sentimentality, not love rooted in, as Maya Angelou talks about, that love is always connected to courage, because courage is the sibling of love when it's connected, because you can't love without courage, and you can't properly have justice without love. And they when they are married together and not separate, something powerful happens, because it causes us to have inner reflection, inner interrogation, and recognizes the brokenness of humanity. But the way that Howard Thurman says it, he says it this way, and we learned as students at Morehouse that God places above our head a crown we will spend the rest of our lives growing tall enough to wear. And when love and justice are connected together, we seek to grow taller, but we're never so arrogant or filled with hubris that we think we wear the crown. All we do is work toward growth and to be better than we were yesterday.
Wow. That's a powerful response. And I love that Howard Thurman quote. And so inspiring to hear too that you went to Morehouse. Where did Thurman teach at Morehouse at one point? I forget.
Thurman was a graduate of Morehouse. Here's the interesting story. So he graduates from Morehouse. One of his math teachers was a person by the name of Benjamin Elijah Mays. Benjamin Elijah Mays then becomes president and becomes the mentor for Martin Luther King Jr. But Howard Thurman writes a book, because he had the opportunity to go to Morehouse and it goes on to Rochester. He writes a book called Jesus and the Disinherited, which originally was a response to a conversation he has with a Hindu brother who was raising the question about, why are you Christian since these Christians enslaved your people? Are you a traitor to your people? So he writes Jesus and the Disinherited to say that the practice that I have is not the practice of the empire, of the enslaver. And so he publishes a book in 1947, and Martin Luther King Jr. picks up this book, and it becomes the framing of his theology for the movement. So all of these players and characters were connected to this institution known as Morehouse, but also connected to Black spirituality that flowed throughout the South.
Mm-hmm. And that's such a powerful example of linking love and justice, and then inspiring a movement too. Well, I wanted to ask a question about the title of your book. You tell a powerful story about discovering a surprising moment of really profound joy that involves your daughter and dancing in the darkness. So, would you be willing to tell that story and share what dancing in the darkness means for you?
Is certainly my daughter's now 21, but the story goes back to when she was about 5. We've been here at Trinity United Church of Christ, just a little background, for about 18 years now. And when she was about 5, it was 2008. Uh, Barack Obama was running for president. He was a member of our church. I had become pastor at that time. And as a result, there were so many right-wing individuals via email, letter, even showing up to the church who were protesting and threats against my predecessor, Dr. Jeremiah Wright, against myself, and against the church. We had to hire special security, bomb-sniffing dogs, you name it. I had 24-hour security at the home. My children had security. They didn't know it, but there was always a shadow near them when they went to school as a result of these threats. And wasn't getting much sleep at all. And one night, late in the middle of the night, we heard some noise, and my wife said, "You need to go check that out." And so I grabbed my rod and my staff that comforts me, that being a bat from Louisville Slugger, and walking around the home looking for where this noise came from. And I hear the noise again, and it's coming from my daughter's room. I go into my daughter's room, and there's my daughter in the middle of the floor, spinning around, saying, "Look, Daddy, I'm dancing." And I said to her immediately with a fatherly voice, "Baby, it's time to go to bed." It was 3 in the morning, and I had to preach a few hours. And she kept saying, "Look, Daddy, I'm dancing," little pigtails, flopping around. And as I'm about to say to her again, "It's time to go to bed," in a very fatherly voice, the Spirit spoke and said, "Stop. Look at your daughter. She is dancing in the darkness. The darkness is around her, but the darkness is not in her." At that moment, I scrapped my sermon that I had to preach in a couple of hours, went down to the study until the sun rose, and I stood in the pulpit on that day talking about the importance of us learning how to dance in the midst of this moment of darkness. That our ancestors have danced, and we must learn how to dance, that the darkness may be around us, but it is not in us.
Hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that and for being so responsive to discovering the surprising joy in the midst of really a crisis time in your life and your community's life. Wow. And just think of all the surprising moments of joy that we're not ready for, and you were ready for that, and then you spoke to it. So that's very powerful. One thing that we do every year is for the daily meditations is choose a theme, and we use that we speak to the theme in our weekly topics. And this year our theme is being salt and light. And as I'm hearing you reflect on your book's themes, spiritual lessons in turbulent times, I'm also hearing it through the lens just of Jesus saying, "You are the salt of the earth and the light of the world." I know you're a longtime minister, a preacher. What does being salt and light mean to you, and how does that connect to these lessons of transformation?
I love that question, and I love the imagery from Scripture. Salt, what shall you preserve? Now, what shall be kept? What shall resist, and what shall survive? There were no refrigerators back in the day, and salting food so that someone else may be nourished. But even if you have all the salt in the world, if there is no light, then everything dies. So it is the responsibility of people of faith, of people of deep spirit, of people who are committed to that which is bigger than themselves, is that we must nourish, we must preserve, but we must be bringers of the light. Now, we are not the light, but we should be a conduit for the light. And when the light touches that which is growing from the soil, it activates something, photosynthesis and all of that. There's something already inside us. There's already something inside every human being waiting to be activated by the light. But once it's activated, how are we going to nourish what has been activated? So we must be salt and we must be light.
I want to ask you, I'm going to circle back to salt and light at the end, but before I do, I wanted to ask you about, I'm really taken with this imagery of consecrating chaos. I just found that powerful. You write about working with the energies of chaos, disruption, disorder, confusion. Many of us are experiencing that in our lives, in our culture, in our society. How do we consecrate chaos, especially when we're overwhelmed?
Mm-hmm. The imagery of chaos fascinates me. Quantum theory fascinates me, in physics, and this idea of entropy fascinates me, because I think there's some spiritual lessons that are rooted in that. And the idea of chaos, I think, is best expressed for someone who sails. A sailor will never tell you, I control the ocean. I can tell you where the waves will go. I can control the wind. No, it is an utter, absolute moment of chaos. But what do? There are certain laws that they know how to navigate. First of all, they make sure their ship is built in such a way that they have the appropriate rudder and mast and balance, and they're able to use the wind, because they never go, a sailor, unlike people on motorboats, they never go direct. They have to tack, left and right to get to a destination. It is the responsibility for people to develop the kind of rudder system, the compass, and be able to catch the wind in the midst of chaos, instead of just standing in that moment and saying, there's nothing I can do. Prime example. Harriet Tubman said, I'm building a rudder and I'm shaping a ship that will take you to freedom. The chaos of the depth of the pain of this antebellum moment, but I'm building a ship, and 300 people go to freedom as a result. People in some of the most destructive and painful moments, especially during wartime, find a way to build the internal ship to affect the external experiences they are dealing with. And that's what we must teach our children, that in chaos, you can build the internal ship to be able to handle the external forces that are before you.
Gosh, I'm hearing a lot of resonance with what you're saying with just the mission of the center, which is the Center for Action and Contemplation, whether it's linking love and justice, whether it's doing the inner work so that we can catch that wind and not be just blown over by the chaos, linking the inner life of prayer with the outer life of action. I just really appreciate how you articulate that, Reverend Moss.
Thank you.
Last question for you. What is how can you give us a couple of practical examples of how to live out salt and light, how to live out love and justice, consecrating chaos. What does that look like for people who are wanting to just hang on to something they could do?
Well, I think to live out salt and light, you have to. So let me first stop. I'm a huge sports fan, specifically basketball, track and field, and my son has gotten me into soccer. Love tennis, all those things. But and also martial arts. Uh, what I'm fascinated by with athletes, top tier athletes and coaches, is they tell you that when you go into to battle, a game, whatever that may be, he said it's not what you do on the court. It's what you do in your daily practice that sets you up for what you do in the court. And the beautiful thing about basketball, I love transition sports, is that it's a sport of improvisation. Can you deal with the chaos of the moment and make a shift creatively? That's the beauty of Michael Jordan, the amazing work of Steph Curry, the beauty of Caitlin Clark. And they are able to shift in the moment, but they have practiced so that when chaos appears, they function like with the physicality of a jazz musician. One of my favorite stories that I want to share, one of my favorite musicians is a person by the name of Wynton Marsalis. And there's a wonderful story from the Atlantic, and I think I shared it in the book, and where Wynton was having kind of a down season, where he's kind of playing the same thing over and over. He's touring, doing all of that, but he was looking for new inspiration, essentially. And a writer from the Atlantic, I believe, goes to hear Wynton play in New York's Village Vanguard, which is a small jazz club, I believe. I've never been there, but I hope to go one day. And he hears Wynton, and it seems like he's got his strength and his creativity back. He's playing this extraordinary solo that the writer is literally had to find a napkin to write down how good this thing was. As he's in the middle of his solo, because this is a small place, someone in the front row, their cell phone goes off and they stand up and walk out and start talking. And everybody in the place is like, oh. And the writer from the Atlantic writes down, magic gone. Wynton Marsalis doesn't skip a beat. What does he do? He begins to play his solo on the trumpet at the tone of the cell phone. He plays the ring of the cell phone and then brings it all the way back to the composition he was playing. They say the place erupted. And the writer says this might have been the greatest solo he has ever heard in his life. That the middle of this moment, this blessed interruption, this moment of chaos, because of the depth of his practice, he was able to handle a moment of chaos. The question is, what's your practice to get you ready for the interruption?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that that invitation to contemplative practice, however we define that readies us to show up in our lives when we're most needed and to adapt to whatever uncertainty is facing us. And basketball, sports, and jazz, just perfect examples. I'm a dad watching basketball. I totally resonate with that, and I'm sure many of the readers will resonate
Your kids
with
play
it.
basketball?
My kids do play basketball. Yeah, I
Wonderful.
go to basketball games
Oh,
every
that's
week.
wonderful.
Yeah. So, gosh, I just want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us today about your book, about really living an inspired life of prayer, of contemplation, publicly, that lives our faith in action in all the ways that you've described. I just really appreciate your time and your wisdom, Dr. Moss.
Oh, Mark, it is my joy, and I just have to say, once again, I mean, I have not been, hired to be PR, but the center is an absolute blessing. The work that you do and all of those who are part of the team, I just want to say thank you. To Dorothy, who's behind everything right now as producer, we give you a major shout out, the Uber producer. Dorothy, do your thing. We're just really appreciative of the work that you're doing. It's touching so many lives.
Thank you so much for that. And God bless you in your ministry, Reverend Moss.
God bless. Take care.